The wind howled like a living thing against the cabin walls, carried with its snow so thick that Clara Brennan couldn't see past her own front porch. She stood at the window, her arms wrapped tight around herself, watching what little remained of their firewood pile disappear under white drifts. 2 more days, maybe 3 if they were careful, and then there would be nothing left to burn. Her 2 sons, 8-year-old Thomas and 5-year-old William, huddled near the struggling fire, their faces pale and pinched with cold despite the blankets wrapped around their thin shoulders. 6 months had passed since the logging accident that took her husband Robert, and Clara had fought every single day since to keep her family alive. But winter in the Montana Territory was merciless, and she was running out of ways to fight. If stories about survival, unexpected kindness, and second chances touch your heart, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss where this journey leads. You won't regret it. Clara was 32 years old but felt ancient. Her hands were raw and blistered from trying to chop wood herself, a task she had no training for, no strength for. The homestead robber had claimed sat 5 miles from the nearest town of Elkhorn Ridge, far enough that the journey in this weather would be suicide. She had tried to chop the fallen trees near their property, but her inexperienced swings with a heavy axe barely made a dent. The few logs she did manage to split were green wood that smoked more than burned. "Mama, I'm cold," William whimpered from his place by the fire. Thomas pulled his younger brother closer, trying to share what little warmth they had. The sight broke Clara's heart into smaller and smaller pieces. "I know, sweetheart," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "We'll figure something out. We always do." But she didn't know how. Not this time. The root cellar held enough food to last them another month if they were careful, but food meant nothing if they froze to death first. She considered burning furniture, but they had so little, and once it was gone, there would be nothing left. She thought about trying to reach town, but the blizzard showed no signs of stopping, and she couldn't risk leaving her children alone or taking them out into this deadly cold. As darkness fell and the temperature dropped even further, Clara added the last 2 logs to the fire and tried not to think about tomorrow. She heated thin soup for dinner, watering down what should have fed them for 2 days to make it stretch for 3. The boys ate without complaint, too cold and tired to notice how little substance was in their bowls. Clara barely touched her own portion, giving most of it to Thomas when William wasn't looking. That night, Clara lay awake in the bed she used to share with Robert, listening to the wind and trying to pray. But the words wouldn't come. God had taken her husband, had left her alone with 2 children to care for in the harshest place imaginable, and she couldn't find it in herself to ask for more help that probably wouldn't come. Instead, she simply whispered into the darkness, "Please, just please," and hoped that was enough. The knocking came just after dawn. 3 solid thuds against the front door that jolted Clara from the brief sleep she'd finally fallen into. Her first thought was wolves, though wolves didn't knock. Her second thought was that the wind had knocked something loose. She pulled on Robert's old coat over her nightdress and approached the door cautiously, aware that opening it would let precious heat escape. When she cracked the door open, she found a man standing on her porch. Not just a man, but a giant. He stood well over 6.5 feet tall, broader than her doorframe, with a thick dark beard crusted with ice and snow. His coat was heavy fur, his hands massive even in thick gloves, and over his shoulder he carried an axe that looked like it weighed as much as Clara herself. For a moment, fear paralyzed her. Then the man spoke, his voice deep but surprisingly gentle. "Ma'am, I apologize for disturbing you so early," he said. "My name is Jonas Whitmore. I'm a lumberjack. Been working camps up north. Got caught in this storm trying to make it to Elkhorn Ridge. I saw smoke from your chimney and was hoping you might allow me to wait out the worst of this weather in your barn. I don't need much, just shelter from the wind." Clara's hand tightened on the door. Every instinct screamed danger. She was alone with her children, miles from help, and this stranger was asking to stay on her property. But there was something in his eyes, something tired and honest, that made her hesitate. "We don't have much," she said carefully. Jonas nodded. "I'm not asking for charity, ma'am. I can see your woodpile is nearly gone. If you'll let me shelter in your barn and provide me 1 hot meal a day, I'll chop enough firewood to see you through the rest of winter." "Good. Seasoned wood from the dead trees. I saw on my way here. That's my offer." Clara stared at the stranger, trying to process his offer. It seemed too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But she looked past Jonas at the blizzard raging behind him, thought about her dwindling woodpile, about her children shivering inside, and made a decision that was equal parts desperation and hope. "The barn is through that way," she said, pointing to the left. "It's not much, but it's dry and out of the wind. There's old hay in the loft. As for meals, I can manage one hot meal a day, though I warn you it won't be fancy." Jonas's weathered face softened with what looked like genuine relief. "That's more than fair, ma'am. Thank you. I'll start on the wood once the storm passes." Clara watched as he trudged through the deep snow toward the barn, his massive frame barely seeming bothered by the wind that would have knocked her down. She closed the door and leaned against it, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake or the best decision of her life. Thomas appeared from the bedroom, his eyes wide. "Who is that, Mama?" he asked. "A man who says he'll chop wood for us," Clara replied. "We'll see if he keeps his word." The storm raged for 2 more days. Clara used the last of their firewood, burning it as slowly as possible, keeping the fire just strong enough to prevent them from freezing. She cooked simple meals of beans and biscuits, taking a portion out to the barn each evening for Jonas. The first time she entered the barn, she was surprised to find that he had cleaned it, organizing tools and supplies that Robert had left in disarray. Jonas had made himself a neat space in the corner, his bedroll laid out on fresh hay, his few possessions arranged with military precision. He stood when she entered, ducking his head to avoid hitting the low rafters. "Thank you for this, ma'am," he said, accepting the plate. "I know trusting a stranger isn't easy." "It's not," Clara admitted, "but I didn't have much choice." She hesitated, then asked, "Why are you really here? Men don't usually travel alone through blizzards." Jonas was quiet for a moment, his large hands wrapped around the warm plate. "I worked a lumber camp up in the Northern Territories," he said finally. "Good work, good pay, but there was an accident 3 weeks ago. A cable snapped and a load of logs came down, killed 2 men, and injured 4 others. I was the foreman. It was my responsibility to check those cables." His voice grew heavy. "I checked them the day before. They seemed sound. But I missed something and men died because of it." Clara felt unexpected sympathy stir in her chest. "That doesn't make it your fault," she said quietly. "Doesn't it?" Jonas replied, meeting her eyes. "I can't go back there. Can't face the families. So I'm heading south, looking for new work, trying to outrun the guilt." He took a breath. "But I'm not a bad man, ma'am. I've never hurt anyone intentionally. Your children are safe with me here." Something in his words, in the genuine pain in his voice, made Clara believe him. She nodded once. "My name is Clara," she said. "Clara Brennan. My husband Robert died in a logging accident 6 months ago. So I understand about guilt you can't shake." A look of understanding passed between them. 2 people carrying the weight of losses that changed everything. Jonas nodded respectfully. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Brennan, and I promise you I'll earn my keep here." When the storm finally broke on the 3rd morning, Clara woke to a sound she hadn't heard in months. The rhythmic crack of an axe splitting wood. She went to the window and saw Jonas already at work. Despite the early hour and bitter cold, he had found the dead standing trees on the edge of the property, the ones Clara had been too weak and unskilled to handle. With practiced efficiency, he felled one, limbed it, and began cutting it into manageable sections. Thomas and William pressed their faces against the window, watching in awe. "He's so big," Mama William breathed. "Is he a giant from the stories?" "He's just a man," Clara said, "but a strong one." Over the following days, Jonas worked from sunrise to sunset. He cut and split wood with a tireless efficiency that amazed Clara. He explained to her that the wood needed the season to dry out properly, so he was cutting far more than they would need immediately. He stacked it carefully in a new woodshed he built using scraps of lumber he found around the property. When he wasn't chopping wood, he repaired things: the sagging barn door, the broken window shutter, the leaning fence posts. Clara kept her end of the bargain, providing one hot meal each day. She found herself cooking a little extra, adding portions that made the meals more substantial. Jonas never asked for more, but always expressed genuine gratitude for whatever she gave him. He ate alone in the barn, never presuming to join them in the cabin, maintaining a respectful distance that Clara appreciated. On the 5th day, Thomas approached Jonas while he was stacking wood. "Can you teach me how to do that?" the boy asked, his voice shy but determined. "I'm the man of the house now. I should know how to chop wood." Jonas stopped working and looked down at the serious-faced 8-year-old. He glanced toward the cabin where Clara stood watching from a window. Then he nodded slowly. "I can teach you," he said, "but only if your mother says it's all right." Thomas ran to ask permission, and Clara found herself agreeing. Over the next hour, she watched from the window as Jonas showed her son how to hold an axe properly, how to gauge where to strike, how to split kindling safely. He was patient and gentle, never showing frustration when Thomas's small swings barely dented the wood. He praised each successful split, no matter how small. That evening, when Clara brought dinner to the barn, Jonas spoke before she could leave. "Your boy is good," he said, "smart and willing to learn. You're raising him right." Clara felt unexpected tears sting her eyes. "It's hard," she admitted. "Doing it alone. Robert was supposed to teach him these things." Jonas nodded. "My father taught me woodcraft when I was young," he said. "Best gift he ever gave me. If you're willing, I'd be honored to pass some of that knowledge to your son. Not trying to replace his father, just trying to help." "I think Robert would have appreciated that," Clara said quietly. 2 weeks passed, and the woodpile grew steadily larger. Jonas worked with quiet determination, speaking little but accomplishing much. Clara found herself watching him from the cabin windows more often than she cared to admit, noticing the care he took with every task, the way he always made sure to wave at William when the 5-year-old pressed his face against the glass. The boys had lost their initial wariness, and Thomas spent every afternoon he could with Jonas, learning not just about wood chopping, but about tracking animals, reading weather signs, and surviving in the wilderness. Clara had started to relax, to believe that maybe this arrangement would work exactly as promised. Then the men from town arrived. It was a gray afternoon when 3 riders approached the cabin. Clara recognized them immediately. Harold Jessup, who owned the general store in Elkhorn Ridge, his son Peter, and a man named Dale Kincaid, who worked as a ranch hand for one of the bigger spreads. They dismounted without being invited and walked toward the cabin with purpose that made Clara's stomach tighten with anxiety. "Mrs. Brennan," Harold called out, tipping his hat but not smiling. "We need to have a word with you." Clara stepped onto the porch, pulling her shawl tight against the cold. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "We've heard you have a stranger living on your property," Harold said. "Big fellow, keeps to himself. Some folks in town are concerned. A woman alone with 2 children shouldn't be taking in drifters. It's not proper and it's not safe." Before Clara could respond, Jonas emerged from behind the barn where he had been working. He set down his axe and walked over slowly, his massive frame making the 3 men unconsciously take a step back. He stopped a respectful distance away, his hands visible and empty. "I'm Jonas Whitmore," he said calmly. "I'm working for Mrs. Brennan in exchange for shelter and meals. Nothing improper about it." Dale Kincaid spat into the snow. "That's for us to decide," he said. "We don't know you, don't know where you came from, or what you're running from. Maybe you're exactly what you say, or maybe you're trouble." Jonas's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. "I'm a lumberjack. Been working camps all over the territory for 15 years. If you want references, I can provide names of foremen who'll vouch for me." "That won't be necessary," Clara said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Jonas has been nothing but respectful and hardworking. He's done more to help us in 2 weeks than anyone from town has done in 6 months. Harold's face reddened. "Now, Clara, that's not fair. We've all been dealing with our own struggles. Times are hard for everyone." "Times are hard," Clara agreed, "which is why I'm grateful to anyone willing to help rather than just show up to criticize." She looked each man in the eye. "Jonas will be staying until his work is finished. If that concerns any of you, you're welcome to come chop our wood yourselves. The three men exchanged uncomfortable glances. Peter Jessup, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We're just looking out for you, Mrs. Brennan. People talk, and we thought you should know what they're saying." "I don't care what people say," Clara replied. "I care about keeping my children warm and fed through winter. Jonas is helping me do that. If the town has a problem with that, the town can mind its own business." After the men left, Clara found her hands shaking with anger and delayed fear. Jonas approached the porch cautiously. "I'm sorry I brought trouble to your door," he said. "If you want me to leave, I understand." "No," Clara said firmly. "You're not leaving. Not until spring. Not until every bit of what you promised is chopped. Those men had no right to come here and pass judgment." "They're not entirely wrong, though," Jonas said quietly. "People will talk. It could damage your reputation, make things harder for you." "My reputation," Clara said bitterly. "My reputation won't keep us warm when the next blizzard hits. Actions matter more than words. Jonas, you've shown me that." That evening, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed thinking about Harold's words, about how the town saw her, about the impossible position of being a woman alone trying to survive. She thought about Jonas in the barn, this gentle giant who had appeared exactly when she needed help most. Part of her was angry that anyone would question her decision. Part of her was scared that they might be right to question it. The next morning, she found Jonas preparing to leave. His pack was on his shoulder, his few possessions gathered. Clara stepped out onto the porch in her nightdress and coat, not caring how it looked. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Leaving before I cause you more problems," Jonas replied. "I've cut enough wood to get you through most of winter. You can find someone else to finish the job." "No," Clara said. "We had an agreement. You don't get to break it just because some scared men came here yesterday." "I'm trying to protect your reputation," Jonas said, frustration creeping into his voice. "I don't need you to protect my reputation." Clara shot back. "I need you to keep your word. I need you to finish what you started. And I need—" She stopped, surprised by the emotion catching in her throat. "I need to know that there are still people in this world who do what they say they'll do." Jonas stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he set down his pack. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll stay. But if this brings you trouble, real trouble, you tell me and I'll go immediately." "Deal," Clara said. Over the following weeks, Jonas continued his work with even more determination. He finished the main woodpile and started on a second, insurance against an extended winter. He taught Thomas more advanced skills, and even little William learned how to stack kindling properly. Clara found herself relying on Jonas for more than just wood. When the well pump froze, Jonas fixed it. When a winter storm tore apart the barn roof, Jonas repaired it. But more than the physical help, Clara realized she had begun to rely on his presence. The cabin felt less lonely knowing he was nearby. Conversations during meal deliveries grew longer. Jonas told stories about his years in the lumber camps, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. Clara shared memories of Robert, of their early dreams of his homestead, of how much harder reality had proven than expectation. One evening in late January, a particularly fierce storm struck. Clara woke in the night to hear something crashing outside. She threw on Robert's coat and rushed to the window, seeing that a large branch had broken off and fallen against the barn. Before she could react, she saw Jonas emerge, fighting against the wind to clear the debris. Without thinking, Clara grabbed a lantern and went outside to help. "Get back inside," Jonas shouted over the wind. "It's too dangerous." "Not as dangerous as that branch crushing the barn," Clara shouted back. "Tell me what to do." Together, they worked to move the heavy branch, Clara holding the lantern and helping to lift when Jonas needed extra leverage. The wind howled around them, snow stinging their faces, but they managed to drag the branch clear. When they finished, both were breathing hard, covered in snow and ice. They stood there in a howling wind, snow swirling around them, both breathing hard from the effort. Jonas looked at Clara, really looked at her, seeing not just the widow he was helping, but the strong, determined woman who would face impossible odds and refuse to break. Clara looked back at him, seeing not just a giant lumberjack, but the kind, damaged man who had kept every promise he made. "You should get inside before you freeze," Jonas said, his voice rough. "So should you," Clara replied. "Come to the cabin. Just until the storm passes. The barn isn't safe with these winds." Jonas hesitated. "That wouldn't be proper, Mrs. Brennan." "Proper doesn't matter when you're dead from cold," Clara said firmly. "My sons are asleep. You can warm up by the fire for an hour, then go back when it's safer." "That's not a request, Jonas. That's an order." A small smile crossed Jonas's face, the first real smile Clara had seen from him. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Inside the cabin, Clara stoked the fire while Jonas stood awkwardly near the door, melting snow pooling around his boots. She poured hot coffee from the pot she always kept warm and handed him a cup. He accepted it gratefully, his large hands wrapping around the warmth. They sat in silence for a while, listening to storm rage outside, the fire crackling between them. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said finally. "Why did you really stop here? There were other homesteads closer to town, safer places to wait out that first storm." Jonas was quiet for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice low. "I saw the smoke from your chimney, weak and thin. Saw the small woodpile. Saw this place was struggling. I've passed a lot of struggling homesteads in my years. Always told myself it wasn't my business. But something about this one, about knowing someone was trying to survive here, I couldn't just walk past. Maybe because of what happened at the camp. Maybe because I needed to do something good to balance out the bad." "You've done more than something good," Clara said. "You've saved us. We would have frozen without you." "You would have found another way," Jonas replied. "You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong," Clara admitted. "Most days I feel like I'm barely holding on. Like, one more bad thing will break me completely." "But you haven't broken," Jonas pointed out. 6 months alone, 2 children to care for, winter closing in, and you're still here. Still fighting. That's the definition of strong. Clara felt tears welling up, the kind that came from someone finally seeing the struggle she had been hiding. "Robert used to tell me I was strong," she said, "but he made everything easier just by being here. Without him, I feel lost most of the time." "I understand that," Jonas said. "I've spent 15 years moving from camp to camp, never staying anywhere long enough to belong. After the accident, I realized I was running from more than just that tragedy. I was running from the possibility of caring about anything enough to be hurt by losing it. And now," Clara asked, "now I'm learning that running doesn't solve anything," Jonas replied. "It just makes you more alone." He met her eyes across the fire. "Being here, helping you and your boys, it's reminded me what it feels like to matter to someone, to have a purpose beyond just surviving." "You do matter," Clara said quietly. "More than you know." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Then a sound from the bedroom made them both turn. Thomas appeared, rubbing his eyes sleepily. "Mama, why is Mr. Jonas inside?" he asked. "The storm damaged the barn," Clara explained. "He's warming up before going back out. Go back to bed, sweetheart." Thomas looked between his mother and Jonas with perception that surprised Clara. "Okay," he said, "but Mr. Jonas, you can stay inside if you want. We don't mind." After Thomas went back to bed, Jonas stood. "I should go," he said. "Storm's dying down some. Thank you for the coffee and the warmth, Mrs. Brennan." "Clara," she said. "Please call me Clara. I think we're past formalities." "Clara," Jonas repeated, and something about hearing her name in his deep voice made her heart do an unexpected flutter. Good night, then. Over the next few weeks, something shifted between them. The conversations grew longer, more personal. Clara found herself laughing at Jonas's stories, something she hadn't done since Robert died. Jonas smiled more, the weight he carried seeming lighter. The boys adored him, following him around when Clara allowed it, helping with small tasks, listening to his teaching with rapt attention. Then in early February, Harold Jessup returned, this time with the town sheriff and 2 other men Clara didn't recognize. Her heart sank as she watched them approach. Jonas was in the back clearing more timber, too far away to hear the riders arrive. "Mrs. Brennan," the sheriff said, his tone apologetic but firm. I'm afraid we have a situation. These men here are from a lumber company up north. They're looking for a man named Jonas Whitmore. They say he stole equipment from their camp and ran off. That's a lie, Clara said immediately. Jonas wouldn't steal anything. One of the strangers stepped forward. We have records showing tools and supplies went missing the same night Whitmore disappeared. We want our property back, and we want him to answer for theft. Clara's mind raced. She didn't believe for a second that Jonas had stolen anything, but she also knew that wealthy lumber companies had power and influence. If they wanted to blame Jonas for their missing equipment, they could make his life hell whether he was guilty or not. Where is he? The sheriff asked. Before Clara could answer, Jonas emerged from the tree line, his axe over his shoulder. He stopped when he saw the group of men, and Clara saw his face harden with resignation. He walked over slowly, setting down his axe deliberately before addressing them. I'm Jonas Whitmore, he said, and I didn't steal anything from your camp. The equipment that went missing was taken by one of the other men, Pete Garrison, 2 days before I left. I reported it to the camp boss before I left. If you check your records honestly, you'll find my report. We checked the records, the stranger said. There's no report, and Garrison says you're the thief. Garrison's lying to cover himself, Jonas replied, his voice steady despite the anger Clara could see in his eyes. I have nothing to hide. You want to search my things. Search them. You won't find your missing equipment, because I don't have it. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. I'm afraid I'll have to take you in until this gets sorted, Jonas. Company's right makes it my duty. Clara stepped forward. How convenient that they show up now, after Jonas has been here working honestly for weeks. How convenient that their thief just happens to be someone who can't defend himself because he's not there to tell his side. The law's the law, ma'am, the sheriff said. I'm sorry. Jonas looked at Clara, and she saw in his eyes that he had expected this, had maybe even been waiting for it. It's all right, he said quietly. I'll go with them. The boys will know how to maintain the woodpile. You'll be fine. No, Clara said, surprised by the fierceness in her own voice. This isn't right, and everyone here knows it. She turned to the sheriff. Give him 1 week. 1 week to send word to his former camp boss, to get testimony from other workers, to prove his innocence. If he can't prove it in 1 week, then take him. But don't destroy an innocent man's life, because some company wants a convenient scapegoat. The sheriff considered this. Jonas could run in a week, he pointed out. Then I'll vouch for him, Clara said. I'll guarantee he stays here. If he runs, you can hold me responsible. Ma'am, you can't, Jonas started, but Clara cut him off with a look. 1 week, she repeated to the sheriff. That's all we're asking. A chance to prove the truth. After a long moment, the sheriff nodded reluctantly. 1 week, he agreed, but Jonas doesn't leave this property. And if he runs, Mrs. Brennan, there will be consequences. After the men left, Jonas turned to Clara with frustration and gratitude warring on his face. You shouldn't have done that, he said. You shouldn't risk yourself for me. Too late, Clara replied. Now let's figure out how to prove you're innocent. Over the next 6 days, Clara and Jonas worked frantically. They wrote letters to the lumber camp, to other workers Jonas had known, to anyone who might provide testimony. Thomas rode to town each day to send telegrams and check for responses. The boys helped Clara with chores so Jonas could focus on gathering any evidence he could remember. On the 7th day, just hours before the sheriff was due to return, a telegram arrived. Thomas rode back from town at full gallop, waving the paper in his hand. It's here, he shouted. The testimony came through. The telegram was from Jonas's former camp boss, confirming that Jonas had indeed reported the missing equipment before leaving, and that Pete Garrison had been caught trying to sell the stolen tools in another town 3 days after Jonas left. The company had already recovered their property, but hadn't bothered to inform anyone looking for Jonas because, as the boss wrote, they were embarrassed by their false accusation. When the sheriff arrived with the lumber company men, Clara handed him the telegram with barely concealed triumph. The strangers read it, their faces darkening with embarrassment and anger at being proven wrong. They left without apology, and the sheriff tipped his hat to both Clara and Jonas before following. You're free, Clara said, the relief making her voice shake. You're completely free. Thanks to you, Jonas replied. You believed in me when you had no reason to. You risked your reputation, your standing, everything. Clara stepped closer to him. I believed in you because I know who you are, she said. You're a good man, Jonas Whitmore. The kind of man who keeps his promises. The kind of man who teaches patience to children and fixes things without being asked. The kind of man She stopped, suddenly aware of what she was about to say. The kind of man Jonas asked softly, stepping closer as well. The kind of man I don't want to leave when spring comes, Clara finished, her heart pounding. Jonas reached out slowly and took her hand in his massive one, gentle despite his strength. I don't want to leave either, he said. I came here planning to work through winter and move on. But somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a job. You and your boys, you become the family I didn't know I needed. Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in months, they were happy tears. What are we going to do? She asked. Well, Jonas said, a smile spreading across his scarred face. I could finish that woodpile I promised, and maybe start planning a bigger cabin for spring, one with room for a family that's growing. Clara laughed through her tears. And maybe teach Thomas and William everything their father would have wanted them to know. That too, Jonas agreed. They stood there in the winter sunlight, hands clasped, the cabin behind them warm and secure with months of firewood stacked neatly outside. Two broken people who had found in each other the possibility of healing, of building something new from loss. The Montana winter still had weeks to run, but neither of them felt cold anymore. If this story moved you, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories about hope, resilience, and unexpected second chances. Leave a comment telling me what touched your heart most about Clara and Jonas's journey. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to start over, that kindness still exists, and that sometimes the best things come from the most unlikely places. Your support helps me continue bringing you these stories of the human spirit. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay warm, stay hopeful, and remember that we all deserve a second chance at happiness.